Hey there, guys. Welcome to today's devotional thought. Just want to start out by saying thank you so much for being a part of this Romans study with me. I've enjoyed reading through the book of Romans, but even more than that, I've enjoyed reading through the book of Romans and getting your comments alongside of that. So thank you so much for being a part of this. Really appreciate this. I've said it before, I love the book of Romans, and the more and more I just appreciate that God told the Apostle Paul no, so that we could benefit years afterwards in just reading this letter. So today we're in Romans chapter 13, verses 8 through 14, and I want to highlight just kind of the last section here. The first part, Paul talks about the importance of love and generosity, caring about your neighbor, which I think is really important, but I really want to focus on the last part because that really impacted me, where Paul talks about just living in light of eternity. And so Paul kind of frames this idea of if Christ was coming tomorrow, how would you live differently? How would you act differently? How would you think differently? And so Paul actually addresses this kind of idea in two other New Testament books. In the books of 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians, he kind of encourages them. And it's really kind of cool. So in 1 Thessalonians, the church in Thessalonica, they were like, hey, Christ is coming back. And so they just basically quit their jobs. They just, were waiting for Christ to come home. And so Paul writes this letter to them to say, whoa, like still be functional, like you still got to go to work, still got to be a husband, still got to be a father, still got to be a person in the community. Like we don't know when he's coming back. Jesus even told us that we don't know, but you still got to be, in society. And so the church in Thessalonica, they do that. And then Paul has to write a second letter to them, 2 Thessalonians, because they, after a season, became very discouraged. And they were like, well, Christ is never coming back. So then they just gave up all hope that was Christ returning. So Paul writes the book of 2 Thessalonians to say, he is coming back. I know it's not as fast as you thought it might be, but don't give up hope, okay? Don't give up, living in light of eternity. And I think there's a message for us, not that we've given up hope living in light of eternity, but the truth is, if we knew tomorrow that Christ was going to return, it would change the way that we lived. It would change the way that we acted. It would change the things that we did. And so I want to encourage you to think in light of eternity. What are the things that you would do differently if you knew Christ was coming back tomorrow? So last year I was kind of making my New Year's resolutions, and I was working through some things. And I'm just fully aware that my priorities are a lot of times out of order. And so I wanted to just write them down on a piece of paper. And so I wrote down my first priority was my relationship to Christ. I wrote down my second priority, it's my relationship to my wife. I wrote down my third priority, which is my relationship to my children. And I wrote down my fourth priority, which was my relationship to the church, to my ministry. And I remember looking at this, Christ, Lindsay, the girls, ministry. And it was just this eye-opening experience where I'm looking at this going, if I'm honest with myself, my ministry probably consumes the majority of my thought. My girls probably consume the second part. Lindsay falls in third, and Jesus oftentimes kind of gets the leftovers. And I was like, oh man, like when you put it on paper, it seems so obvious and so embarrassing. And so that was good for me to just go, man, I've got to live in light of eternity. So my challenge for you today is to live in light of eternity. I hope that we would never grow comfortable in this world, but that we'd always be longing for that return with Christ, that close relationship with him. And so I'm going to encourage you with that today. Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you once again just for being a part of this.